My husband claimed he was blind. For 3 years, I organized his life around that story. I read his emails out loud, I described every meal, I guided him through doorways, I became his eyes. What he didn't know was that I had a photographic memory for details, dates, conversations, the exact placement of objects. And when I walked into our bedroom and saw him sitting on the edge of our bed, scrolling through my phone with perfect clarity, reading my texts without hesitation or struggle, everything I thought I knew shattered in an instant. Where are you watching from? But let me start from the beginning. I met Daniel at a hospital charity event in March 2021. I was volunteering as a sign language interpreter, and he was there with a white cane and dark glasses, introduced as a motivational speaker who'd lost his sight in a car accident 2 years prior. He was charming, confident, and when he asked if I'd help him find the restroom, I didn't hesitate. That conversation in the hallway turned into coffee the next week, which turned into dinners, which turned into a relationship that felt like the most genuine thing I'd ever experienced. He proposed in June 2022. The proposal was perfect. He'd memorized every word, told me he didn't need to see me to know I was beautiful, that he'd fallen in love with my voice, my kindness, my patience. I cried. I said yes. My parents loved him. My friends thought he was brave and inspiring. Everyone did. We got married that September. Small ceremony, immediate family only. I moved into his apartment downtown, a place he said he'd set up before the accident with the help of an occupational therapist. Everything was labeled in Braille. His phone had voiceover settings. His computer had screen reading software. I watched him navigate all of it flawlessly. I had no reason to doubt anything. I became his full-time support system without even realizing it. I read his mail. I managed his calendar. I drove him to appointments. I described the world constantly. Colors, faces, street signs, the way light hit the windows in the morning. He'd nod and smile and thank me, touching my face with his hands like he was memorizing me through his fingertips. It felt romantic. It felt necessary. It felt real. Looking back, there were small things that didn't quite fit. The way he moved through rooms sometimes felt too confident. The way he'd occasionally glance toward the TV when a loud scene played, then catch himself and turn his head away. The way he always knew which cabinet I'd just opened in the kitchen, even when I hadn't made a sound. But I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that blind people develop incredible spatial awareness, that he'd lived in that apartment for years, that I was overthinking. He worked from home doing phone consultations for an insurance company. They'd accommodated his disability, he said. He had his own office with the door closed most days. I respected his space. I never went in unless he asked. I never questioned why he needed privacy for work calls that sometimes lasted hours. Money was always tight. He said disability payments didn't cover much, and his job only brought in part-time income. I picked up extra shifts as a medical interpreter at 3 different hospitals. I paid for most of our groceries, our utilities, half the rent even though he'd lived there first. I didn't mind. I thought I was supporting my husband through a hardship. I thought I was being a good partner. Then came Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. I remember the date exactly because it was my younger sister's birthday, and I'd been texting her all morning making plans for dinner that weekend. I'd left my phone on the bathroom counter when I jumped in the shower, something I did every morning because I liked to keep it nearby in case work called with an emergency interpretation request. The shower was quick, maybe 7 minutes. I wrapped a towel around myself and opened the bathroom door, and that's when I saw him. Daniel was sitting on the edge of our bed, fully dressed for the day, holding my phone in both hands. He wasn't holding it close to his face the way someone with limited vision might. He wasn't using voiceover. The screen wasn't zoomed in. He was just reading, scrolling through my text conversation with my sister. His eyes were moving left to right, perfectly tracking the words. His face was focused, intent. He looked exactly like anyone else reading a text message. I stood in the doorway, dripping water onto the hardwood floor, unable to breathe. He didn't notice me for another 5 seconds. When he finally looked up, his expression flickered. Panic, then calculation, then something that looked almost like relief. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice smooth and casual. He locked my phone and set it down on the nightstand, then turned his face slightly away from me, the way he always did when he wanted to seem like he was listening instead of looking. "Did you say something? I thought I heard you call my name." I didn't call his name. I hadn't made a sound. I was still standing there in my towel, cold water dripping down my legs, staring at him. "No," I said slowly. "I didn't say anything." "Oh." He smiled, that same warm smile he always gave me. "My mistake. I'm getting ready for my 11 o'clock call. Did you need something?" He stood up and walked toward his office, moving through our bedroom with the same careful, measured steps he always used. One hand slightly extended, the other trailing along the wall. Perfect performance. I watched him disappear into the hallway, heard his office door click shut. I locked the bathroom door and sat on the edge of the tub. My hands were shaking. I kept replaying what I'd seen, the angle of his head, the focus in his eyes, the way he'd been scrolling with his thumb, natural and easy, no hesitation. There were 2 possibilities. Either I'd hallucinated the whole thing, or my husband had been lying to me for 3 years. I got dressed mechanically. Jeans, sweater, socks. I braided my wet hair. I picked up my phone from the nightstand where he'd left it. I checked my messages. Nothing deleted, nothing sent. He'd just been reading. I sat on the couch in our living room for 20 minutes trying to make sense of it. Maybe he had partial vision he'd never told me about. Maybe the doctors had been wrong about the extent of his blindness. Maybe this was some kind of miracle recovery he hadn't realized was happening. But if that were true, why would he hide it? Why would he keep pretending? The office door opened. Daniel came out carrying his white cane, tapping it against the floor in that rhythmic pattern I'd heard 1,000 times. He smiled in my general direction. "I'm going to make some tea before my call. Want anything?" "No," I said. "Thanks." I watched him move through the kitchen. He opened the cabinet where we kept the mugs, the third one from the left, second shelf, without hesitation. He filled the kettle. He turned on the stove. He did everything with the same careful precision he always used, making a performance out of spatial memory. Except I'd reorganized that cabinet 2 days ago. I'd moved the mugs to the right side. I'd mentioned it to him at the time, told him where everything was now, made sure he knew the new layout. He'd gone directly to the new location. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Daniel," I said, "can you come here for a second?" "Sure, babe." He walked toward my voice, hand extended, and sat down next to me on the couch. He reached out and found my knee, squeezed it gently. "What's up?" "I was thinking," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Maybe we should go see your eye doctor soon, get a checkup. It's been a while, right?" Something flickered across his face. "Yeah, maybe. I'll call them next week." "When was your last appointment?" He tilted his head like he was thinking. "Maybe 6 months ago? They said everything was stable. Same level of damage. No changes." "Do you still have the paperwork from that visit?" "Probably in my office somewhere. Why?" "No reason. I just want to make sure we're staying on top of things." He kissed my forehead. "You're so good to me. I don't know what I'd do without you." The kettle whistled. He stood up and walked back to the kitchen, poured his tea, and returned to his office. The door clicked shut again. I sat there for another hour, thinking. Then I called my older sister, Rachel. Rachel was a paralegal at a family law firm downtown. She was sharp, cynical, and had never fully warmed to Daniel. She'd told me once, right after the wedding, that something about him felt too smooth. I'd brushed it off as overprotectiveness. "Hey," I said when she picked up. "Are you busy?" "For you? Never. What's wrong? You sound weird." "I need to tell you something, and I need you not to think I'm crazy." "Okay." I told her everything. The phone, the scrolling, the way he'd moved through the kitchen, the cabinet reorganization, the way he'd locked my phone and acted normal. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "Emma," she finally said, "you need to test this." "Test what?" "Test whether he can see, deliberately. Set up situations where he'd have to either blow his cover or maintain the lie, and document everything." "I can't just—" "Yes, you can. If you're wrong, nothing changes. If you're right—" She paused. "If you're right, you need evidence, because if he's faking blindness, there's a reason, and it's probably not a good one." I thought about our finances, the way I'd taken on extra work, the disability benefits he collected every month, the way I'd restructured my entire life around supporting him. "What do I do?" I asked. "Start small," Rachel said, "and keep a log, dates, times, exactly what happened. If this goes where I think it might go, you'll need records." That night, I started. I created a locked note on my phone titled Household Observations. I made the first entry, November 12th, 2024, 10:37 a.m. Saw D holding my phone, reading texts without assistance. Eyes tracking normally left to right. No accessibility features enabled. When confronted, claimed to have heard me call his name. I didn't. Later went directly to reorganized cabinet location I'd told him about 2 days prior. Then I started planning my first test. On Thursday morning, I rearranged the living room. I did it while Daniel was in the shower. I moved the coffee table from the center of the room to the left side, angled it next to the couch. I shifted the armchair from the corner to where the coffee table had been. Nothing drastic, but enough that someone who was actually blind would stumble or at least pause to reorient themselves. I sat on the couch with my laptop, pretending to work on some medical terminology flashcards, and waited. Daniel came out 20 minutes later, hair wet, white cane in hand. He walked toward the kitchen, tapping the cane ahead of him in that same rhythmic pattern. He moved through the living room without hesitation. He didn't hit the coffee table. He didn't even slow down. He'd adjusted his path by at least 3 feet without any indication he'd noticed the change. I logged it. November 14th, 2024, 8:47 a.m. That afternoon, I tried something else. I left a stack of papers on the floor near the hallway, medical bills I was supposed to review. I spread them out, not quite blocking the path, but close enough that someone would either see them and step over them, or trip over them if they weren't paying attention. Daniel came out of his office around 2 o'clock to get water. He walked down the hallway, stepped cleanly over the papers without breaking stride, filled his glass in the kitchen, and walked back. The same clean avoidance on the return trip. Someone who was blind wouldn't have known the papers were there. He would have kicked them or stepped on them. I logged it. November 14th, 2024, 2:13 p.m. By Friday, I was starting to feel sick. Not because I was wrong, but because I was right. I called Rachel again during my lunch break. I was sitting in my car outside St. Mary's Hospital, where I'd just finished interpreting for a deaf patient in the emergency room. "I've tested him 3 times, I told her. "He's avoiding obstacles he shouldn't be able to see. He's reading my phone. He's moving through spaces without any of the accommodation behavior he should have. How's he explaining it? He's not. He's just being really careful to maintain the act around me now, like he knows I'm watching." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Emma, I need you to think about something. If Daniel has been faking blindness for 3 years, what else has he been lying about?" The question hit me like cold water. "I don't know," I said. "His medical records, his disability claims, his work situation, his finances. You said money's always tight, right?" "Yeah. But he collects disability, and he has a job. Where's that money going?" I didn't have an answer. "I think you need to do some digging," Rachel said. "Check your bank accounts, check his phone records if you can, look at his disability paperwork. I'm not trying to scare you, but if someone's willing to fake a disability for 3 years, they're probably hiding other things too." That weekend, I went through our apartment while Daniel was out getting groceries. something he claimed to do with a rideshare service that helped disabled passengers, but now I wondered if he was just driving himself somewhere. I started with the filing cabinet in his office. I found our marriage certificate, our lease agreement, my medical records from a minor surgery last year, insurance papers, tax returns. But I couldn't find anything related to his blindness. No medical records, no disability determination letters, no doctor's notes, nothing from the DMV about a suspended license, nothing from Social Security. It was like the documentation didn't exist. I checked our joint banking account on my phone. My paychecks went in. Small amounts came out for rent, utilities, groceries. But I couldn't see any disability deposits. I couldn't see his work income either. I logged into my email and searched for anything related to insurance or benefits. Nothing. Then I remembered, he'd set up the apartment before we met. He'd told me he had his own accounts for his work and disability payments, separate from our joint account because it was easier for him to manage with voice banking. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? I'd trusted him completely. I sat at his desk staring at his closed laptop. I didn't know his password. I'd never needed to. But I knew he kept it in his office, and I knew he used it for his work calls. I opened the laptop. It asked for a password. I tried a few obvious combinations: his birthday, our anniversary, his mother's name. Nothing worked. Then I tried something else. I tried my birthday. The laptop unlocked. My hands were shaking as I navigated to his browser history. I expected to see work-related insurance sites, maybe some accessibility forums or screen reader software downloads. Instead, I found sports betting sites, fantasy football leagues, stock trading platforms, online poker. I clicked through. The accounts were logged in. I could see everything. He'd lost $43,000 in the last 18 months. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the floor drop out from under me. Then I heard the front door open. "Emma?" Daniel's voice called from the living room. "I'm back. Can you help me put the groceries away?" I closed the laptop. I walked out of his office. I smiled and helped him unpack the bags, my mind racing. "Everything okay?" he asked, tilting his head toward me with that concerned expression he always used. "Yeah," I said, "everything's fine." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to him in bed, listening to him breathe, wondering who I'd actually married. In the morning, I called Rachel again. "He's been gambling," I told her. "Online, $43,000, and I can't find any medical records for his blindness. Nothing. It's like it doesn't exist." Rachel swore quietly. "Emma, you need a lawyer. Like now. Not next week. Now." "I don't." "Yes, you do. Because if he's been collecting disability benefits for a blindness condition he doesn't have, that's fraud. Federal fraud. And if you're married to him, you could be implicated. You need to protect yourself." My stomach dropped. What do I do? "I'm calling my boss. She handles cases like this. Can you meet tomorrow?" "Yes." "Bring everything. Bank statements, any paperwork you have, your log, all of it." "And Emma?" "Yeah?" "Don't let him know you're doing this. Not yet. If he realizes you're onto him, he'll either disappear or try to control the narrative. You need to stay 3 steps ahead." I met Rachel's boss, Patricia Holbrook, on Monday afternoon at her law office on the 8th floor of a building downtown. Patricia was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She sat across from me in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, reading through the timeline I'd typed up over the weekend. Rachel sat next to me, her hand on my shoulder. Patricia finally looked up. "How long have you been married?" 2 years. We dated for about 1.5 years before that." "And in all that time, you never questioned his blindness?" "No," I said. "Why would I? He had the cane, the dark glasses, the braille labels. He had screen reading software. He acted blind." "Did you ever meet his doctors?" I thought about it. "No. He always said he preferred to go alone, that it was easier. I offered to come a few times. but he said it made him feel like less of an adult if I had to hold his hand through medical appointments. Patricia made a note. Did you ever see documentation, medical records, disability determination letters, anything official? No, he said they were in his files, but I never looked. I trusted him. And you've searched now? Yes, I can't find anything. No medical records related to vision loss. No paperwork from Social Security or any disability program. Nothing. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Here's what I think is happening. Your husband is running a long-term con. He's likely never been blind, or if he was, it was temporary and he's been exaggerating it for financial gain. The gambling losses suggest he's desperate for money. The lack of documentation suggests he's either faking the disability entirely or his benefits were denied and he never told you. What do? I asked. First, we need evidence. Real, documented evidence that he can see. Photos, videos, witness statements. What you have so far is good, but it's circumstantial. We need something undeniable. How do I get that? You set up a situation where he has to make a choice. Blow his cover or maintain the lie in a way that's obviously impossible, and you record it. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. I can help with that. Patricia continued. Second, we need to protect you legally. If he's been claiming disability benefits fraudulently, that's a federal crime. You need to make it very clear that you were deceived, that you had no knowledge of the fraud, and that you're cooperating fully once you discovered it. That means reporting him. My chest tightened. Reporting him? To the Social Security Administration, possibly to law enforcement. I know that sounds extreme, but Emma, if you don't report him, you could be seen as complicit, especially since you're married and your finances are intertwined. I felt dizzy. I don't want him to go to jail. I just want the truth. The truth is that he's been lying to you for years and potentially stealing from federal programs meant for people who actually need them, Patricia said, her voice gentle but firm. I understand this is hard, but you need to think about protecting yourself. If you're following this story and want to see how it ends, hit that subscribe button. I promise you, this gets so much bigger than I ever expected. Over the next 2 weeks, Rachel and I planned. We decided to set up a situation at Thanksgiving dinner, a family gathering at my parents' house where there would be witnesses, where Daniel would be in an unfamiliar environment, where he'd have to either maintain his act perfectly or slip up in front of people who could testify later. My parents were hosting 20 people, cousins, aunts, uncles, my grandmother. I told them I needed their help with something, that I couldn't explain everything yet, but I needed them to trust me. I asked them to set up the house in specific ways, move furniture, place objects in unusual spots, create situations where someone who was genuinely blind would struggle. My mom looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but she agreed. In the meantime, I kept logging everything. Every time Daniel moved through a space too easily, every time he glanced at something he shouldn't be able to see, every time he reacted to visual information without explanation. November 19th, walked directly to the remote control on the kitchen counter without searching. Item was not in its usual location. November 21st, turned his head to look at a car accident we passed while riding as a passenger. Claimed he heard the sirens, but turned his head before the sirens were audible. November 23rd, picked up a pen I'd dropped on the floor, handing it to me without feeling around for it first. I also started checking our mail more carefully. On November 20th, I found a letter addressed to Daniel from a collections agency. I opened it. He owed $12,000 on a credit card I didn't know existed. I photographed the letter. I added it to my file. The night before Thanksgiving, Daniel was in a good mood. He helped me pack the dishes we were bringing to my parents' house, green bean casserole and a pumpkin pie. He talked about how much he was looking forward to seeing my family, how grateful he was that they'd been so welcoming. I know it's not easy for them, he said, his hand on my back as we stood in the kitchen. Having to accommodate me. but they've never made me feel like a burden. You're not a burden, I said automatically, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He kissed the side of my head. I love you, Emma. I don't say it enough, but I do. You've made my life so much better. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I smiled and said, I love you too. That night, lying in bed next to him, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the man I thought I'd married versus the man I was actually married to. The gap between those two people felt infinite. On Thanksgiving morning, we drove to my parents' house in my car. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, facing forward, his dark glasses on, his white cane folded in his lap. He made small talk about the weather, about how busy traffic probably was, about whether my mom would make her famous stuffing this year. I gripped the steering wheel and drove. My parents lived in a split-level house in the suburbs, 40 minutes outside the city. We pulled into the driveway around noon. Cars were already lining the street. My aunt's minivan, my uncle's truck, my cousin's sedan. Daniel grabbed his cane and unfolded it as we walked to the front door. I watched him tap it against the sidewalk, heard the familiar rhythm. My chest felt tight. My mom answered the door. Emma, Daniel, come in, happy Thanksgiving. She hugged us both. Daniel smiled and thanked her, told her something smelled amazing. My mom guided him inside with a hand on his elbow, the way she always did, and I followed with the casserole and pie. The house was full. My dad was in the kitchen carving the turkey. My grandmother was holding court in the living room, telling stories to my younger cousins. My Aunt Julie was setting the dining room table. Rachel was in the corner near the fireplace, and when our eyes met, she gave me a small nod. Everything was ready. Daniel, honey, let me take your coat, my mom said. She hung it in the closet, then turned to him. Can I get you something to drink? We have wine, beer, cider, soda. I'll take a beer, thanks, Daniel said. Whatever's cold. My mom disappeared into the kitchen. Daniel stood in the entryway, his cane in front of him, head tilted like he was listening to the room. My cousin's 5-year-old son, Tyler, ran past him chasing a foam football. Daniel didn't react beyond a polite smile. Then my dad appeared from the kitchen, beer in hand. Daniel, good to see you, son. Here you go. He held out the bottle. Daniel reached for it with perfect precision, his hand going directly to the bottle's neck without any searching or fumbling. He took it, nodded his thanks, and took a sip. My dad's expression flickered. He glanced at me. I gave him a tiny shake of my head. Not yet. Why don't you come sit down? My dad said. We've got about 30 minutes before dinner. He started to guide Daniel toward the living room, but then stopped. Oh, wait. Emma, did you see where I put the remote? Your mother wants me to turn on the football game. I think it's on the coffee table, I said. I was lying. The remote was on the bookshelf behind the couch, mixed in with some picture frames, somewhere no one would normally put it. Huh. My dad walked into the living room, made a show of looking around the coffee table. Don't see it. Daniel followed him into the room. He stood near the couch, facing roughly toward the TV. Maybe it fell between the cushions, my mom suggested, coming back from the kitchen. My dad started lifting couch cushions. Daniel stood there for a moment, then turned his head slightly. His eyes, behind those dark glasses, tracked toward the bookshelf. He took 2 steps in that direction. Found it, he said. He reached up to the shelf, his hand going directly to the remote between a picture frame of my college graduation and a decorative candle. He pulled it out and held it up. It was up here. The room went still. My dad stared at him. My mom's smile froze. Rachel stood up from her spot near the fireplace. My grandmother, sitting in her recliner, looked between Daniel and me with her eyebrows raised. How did you? My mom started. Lucky guess, Daniel said quickly. He handed the remote to my dad, his smile easy. I heard Emma mention once that you guys keep stuff on the bookshelves. Just figured I'd check. You couldn't have known it was there, my dad said slowly. You walked right to it. I didn't walk right to it. I heard the conversation about it being missing, figured it might be somewhere high up, and I checked. That's all. Daniel, Rachel said, stepping forward. That shelf is 5 feet off the ground. There are a dozen things on it. You reached up and grabbed the remote on your first try without feeling around. I got lucky. Take off your glasses, Rachel said. The air in the room shifted. Excuse me? Daniel's voice went cold. Take them off. If you're blind, it shouldn't matter. Let's see your eyes. Rachel, that's incredibly rude. Is it? She crossed her arms. Because Emma's been telling me some interesting things about how you read her phone, about how you move through spaces without any of the accommodation behaviors you should have, about how you avoid obstacles you shouldn't be able to see. Daniel turned toward me. I couldn't see his eyes behind the glasses, but I felt the weight of his stare. Emma, he said quietly. What is she talking about? I saw you, I said. My voice was shaking, but I kept going. 2 weeks ago, you were reading my texts. You were sitting on our bed with my phone in your hands, scrolling and reading without any accessibility features turned on. I saw you. That's ridiculous. And then you walked to the new mug location in the kitchen, the one I'd moved 2 days before. You went directly to it. I remembered where you said, and you stepped over papers I'd left on the hallway floor without tripping on them or even pausing. I have spatial awareness. And just now, my dad said, his voice hard, you walked across an unfamiliar room and found a remote on a shelf you've never encountered before, in the middle of picture frames and candles, without hesitation. No one is that lucky. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're all ganging up on me because of what? Because your daughter has been paranoid and decided to invent some conspiracy theory? Take off the glasses, Rachel repeated. No. Why not? Because this is humiliating. Because I don't have to prove my disability to any of you. Yes, Patricia's voice came from the doorway. You do. Everyone turned. Patricia stood in the entrance to the living room, dressed in slacks and a blazer, holding a briefcase. She must have arrived while we were focused on Daniel. Who the hell are you? Daniel asked. Patricia Holbrook. I'm Emma's attorney. She walked into the room, set her briefcase on the side table, and pulled out a folder. And I have some questions for you, Daniel. Starting with why you have no medical records documenting your alleged blindness, despite claiming to receive disability benefits for the last 4 years. Daniel's face went pale. I don't know what. I filed a request with Social Security. You're not receiving disability benefits. You never have been. There's no claim on file in your name for vision loss or any other condition. The room was silent. That's a mistake, Daniel said. There has to be. It's not a mistake. I confirmed it through 3 different channels. You have no approved disability claim. Daniel stood frozen in the center of my parents' living room, surrounded by my entire family. 20 people, all watching him. My grandmother had put down her crossword puzzle. My cousins had stopped talking. Even Tyler, the 5-year-old, was staring with big, confused eyes. This is insane, Daniel said. His voice had an edge to it now, something sharp and defensive I'd never heard before. You people are crazy. I'm blind. I've been blind for 6 years. I have documentation. Show us, Patricia said calmly. She opened her briefcase wider. Show us the medical records. Show us the disability determination letter. Show us anything official that proves what you're claiming. They're at home. No, they're not. Emma searched your files. There's nothing there. Daniel's head snapped toward me. You went through my stuff? You invaded my privacy? You've been lying to me for 3 years, I said. My voice came out stronger than I expected. You've been pretending to be disabled. You made me organize my entire life around taking care of you. I gave up job opportunities. I worked extra shifts to support us financially. I read every single thing out loud to you. I described the world constantly. And you've been lying the whole time. That's not. I haven't. The coffee table, my dad interrupted. This morning before you got here, we moved the coffee table from the center of the room to over there, against the wall. When you walked in, you avoided it perfectly. You adjusted your path without any indication you'd notice the change. How did you do that if you can't see it? Daniel didn't answer. And the bookshelf, Rachel added. You reached up and grabbed the remote on your first try. No one does that by accident. You saw where it was. I have exceptional spatial awareness. Bullshit, my Uncle Rick said from the dining room doorway. He was a veteran, Army Ranger, retired 5 years ago after 22 years of service. He'd been quiet until now. I served with a guy who lost his vision in Baghdad. IED explosion. He was one of the best soldiers I ever knew, learned to navigate better than most sighted people. But even he couldn't walk into a strange room and find a specific object on a cluttered shelf on the first try. That's not spatial awareness, that's vision. Daniel's hands clenched around his white cane. You don't understand? Then help us understand, Patricia said. Explain to us how someone with no medical records, no disability benefits, no documentation at all, has been living as a blind person for 6 years. Explain the $43,000 in gambling losses Emma found on your laptop. Explain the credit card debt from the collections letter. His face went white. You had no right, She had every right, Patricia snapped. She's your wife. Your financial problems affect her. And if you've been lying about your disability to obtain benefits or sympathy or financial support from her, that's fraud. That's elder abuse if you've been taking money from your family. That's marriage fraud if you misrepresented yourself to get her to marry you. I love her. Then why did you lie? I asked. My voice cracked. If you love me, why would you make me believe you were blind? Why would you let me spend 3 years taking care of you for something that wasn't even real? Daniel stared at me. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked actually helpless. Not the performed helplessness of someone pretending to be blind, but the real helplessness of someone who'd been caught and didn't know how to talk his way out. Take off the glasses, Rachel said again, right now, or I'm calling the police and reporting fraud. You can't. Yes, I can. And I will. You have 10 seconds. Daniel's hand went to his glasses. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he pulled them off. His eyes were normal, clear, focused, brown. No cloudiness, no damage, no indication of any vision problem. He looked at me directly, meeting my gaze for the first time in 3 years without the barrier of dark lenses. I felt something break inside my chest. You can see, I whispered. Yes, he said quietly. I can see. My mom made a small sound. My dad swore under his breath. Rachel pulled out her phone and started recording. How long? I asked. How long have you been able to see? Always, he said. I was never blind, not even for a day. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. My Aunt Julie was shouting. My Uncle Rick was demanding answers. My grandmother stood up from her chair, face red, saying something about disgrace and shame. Patricia held up a hand. Everyone quiet. Let him talk. Daniel looked around the room, then back at me. It started as a way to get sympathy. I was broke, living in a bad apartment, working part-time jobs I hated. I saw a guy with a white cane getting helped at a coffee shop, and people were so nice to him. They paid for his drink. They offered him a ride. They treated him like he mattered. So you decided to pretend? Rachel asked, her voice ice cold. I thought it would be temporary, just a way to get some help, some attention. But then I realized how easy it was. People wanted to help. They wanted to feel good about themselves. I got free meals, free rides, people offering me money. I met Emma at that charity event. He looked at me. And you were so kind, so genuine. And I thought if I kept up the act, maybe I could have a real relationship with someone good. You thought you could build a relationship on a lie? I asked. I didn't think that far ahead, he admitted. I just knew that if I told you the truth, you'd leave. Everyone would leave, and I'd go back to being nobody. You are nobody, my dad said harshly. You're a con artist who manipulated my daughter for 3 years. I love her. You don't love anyone, Patricia said. You love what she gave you. A place to live, financial support, emotional labor. You used her. Daniel turned to me. Emma, please. I know I screwed up. I know I lied. But everything else was real. My feelings for you, our marriage, all of it. That was real. How can I believe anything you say? I asked. Tears were running down my face now. You lied about something fundamental. You made me think I was helping you, that I was being a good partner. You let me exhaust myself taking care of you when you didn't need help at all. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Rachel said. Sorry doesn't undo 3 years of fraud. Patricia opened her folder and pulled out several documents. Daniel, I need you to answer some questions. Did you ever apply for disability benefits claiming blindness? He hesitated. Yes. When? About 5 years ago. And what happened? They denied me. They said I didn't have sufficient medical documentation. Did you appeal? No. Did you ever tell Emma you'd been denied? No. Did you ever tell her you weren't receiving disability payments? No. She assumed I was. I never corrected her. Patricia made notes. Did you accept money from her under the pretense that you needed financial support due to your disability? Yes. Did you accept money from anyone else under that pretense? He was quiet for a long moment. My parents sent me money a few times. My sister, some friends. How much total? I don't know. Maybe 15,000, 20,000 over the years. My mom gasped. You stole from your own family? I didn't steal. They gave it to me. Under false pretenses, Patricia said. That's fraud, Daniel. Textbook fraud. Patricia closed her folder and looked directly at Daniel. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack your belongings and leave Emma's apartment today. You're going to sign whatever divorce papers she files. You're not going to contest anything, and you're going to cooperate fully when I report this to the appropriate authorities. Report what? Daniel's voice cracked. I didn't break any laws. Actually, you broke several. Fraud, potentially wire fraud if any of the money was sent electronically, false statements in various contexts, and depending on how you filed your taxes, possibly tax fraud as well. I'll go to jail? Maybe. Maybe not, but that's not Emma's problem anymore. Daniel turned to me. He looked desperate now, small. Emma, please, we can work through this. I'll get help. I'll see a therapist. Stop, I said. Just stop talking. I love you. You don't even know what love is, I said. The words came out hard and final. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't steal 3 years of someone's life for your own benefit. I made a mistake. You made 1,000 mistakes. Every single day for 3 years. Every time you put on those glasses, every time you picked up that cane, every time you let me read something to you or describe the world or help you through a doorway, those were all choices. You chose to lie to me, over and over again. My grandmother walked over to where Daniel was standing. She was 79 years old, barely 5 feet tall, but when she looked up at him, she had the presence of someone twice her size. Young man, she said, her voice quiet but sharp, I have lived through wars, economic depressions, the deaths of loved ones, and more hardship than you can imagine. And in all that time, I have never met anyone as cowardly as you. You didn't pretend to be blind because you needed help. You did it because you wanted to avoid the hard work of being a real person. You wanted shortcuts, sympathy, and someone to take care of you. My granddaughter gave you all of that, and you repaid her with lies. Daniel didn't respond. He just stood there, his shoulders sagging. Get out of my house, my grandmother said. and don't ever come back." My dad stepped forward. "I'll drive him back to get his stuff. Emma, you stay here with your mother and Rachel. You don't need to be there for this." I nodded. I couldn't speak. My dad took Daniel by the arm, not gently, but not rough either, and walked him toward the door. Daniel grabbed his coat from the closet. He picked up his white cane from where he'd set it against the wall. He paused at the door and looked back at me one more time. "I really did love you," he said. "No," I said. "You loved what I did for you. There's a difference." Then they were gone. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then my mom came over and wrapped her arms around me, and I started crying. Not gentle tears, but hard, shaking sobs that felt like they were tearing me apart from the inside. Rachel and Patricia joined us. My Aunt Julie brought tissues. My Uncle Rick made tea. My grandmother sat in her chair and watched me with sad, knowing eyes. "I'm so stupid," I said through the crying. "How did I not see it?" "You're not stupid," Patricia said firmly. "You trusted someone you loved. That's not stupidity. That's humanity. He's the one who exploited that." "But there were signs." "Signs you noticed," Rachel pointed out. "You tested him. You documented everything. You figured it out. That's not stupid. That's smart." Over the next hour, we sat in the living room and talked through next steps. Patricia explained the divorce process. Rachel offered to help me find a new apartment. My parents said I could stay with them as long as I needed. "What about the fraud charges?" I asked. "Do I have to be the one to report him?" "Technically, no," Patricia said. "But it would help. And honestly, Emma, he deserves to face consequences. He stole from you, from his family, possibly from others. If you don't report him, he'll just do this to someone else." I thought about it. I thought about some other woman, some other kind person, getting pulled into Daniel's web of lies. "Okay," I said. "I'll do it. I'll report him." My phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. "Got his stuff. He's out. Change the locks. You're safe." I showed the message to everyone. My mom squeezed my hand. "What do I do now?" I asked. "I don't even know how to move forward from this." "One day at a time," my grandmother said. "You grieve, you heal, and you remember that his actions say everything about him and nothing about you." We ate Thanksgiving dinner 2 hours later than planned. The turkey was a little dry, the stuffing was cold, but no one complained. We sat around the table, my family, Patricia, all of us, and we ate and talked about normal things. Football, Black Friday sales, my cousin's new job, Tyler's upcoming birthday party. It felt surreal, like I'd lived through an earthquake and now everyone was pretending the ground was solid again. But in a way, it was. The ground was solid. Daniel was the earthquake, and he was gone. After dinner, Rachel and I sat on the back porch with mugs of coffee, watching the sun set over the neighbor's fence. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I will be." "Yeah," she agreed. "You will." 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. Patricia handled everything. Daniel didn't contest it. He signed the papers without argument, probably because he knew fighting would only bring more attention to what he'd done. I also filed a fraud complaint with the district attorney's office. I provided them with all my documentation, the timeline, the photos, the bank records, the collections letter, Patricia's social security verification that he'd never received benefits. The DA's office opened an investigation. 3 months later, I was sitting in a new apartment across town, smaller than the old one but entirely mine. The walls were pale yellow. I'd bought plants for the windowsills. I had a bookshelf full of mysteries and medical textbooks and a collection of novels I'd been meaning to read for years. Rachel called on a Tuesday morning. "He took a plea deal," she said. I set down my coffee. "What kind of deal?" 2 years probation, restitution to you and his family for the money he took under false pretenses, mandatory counseling, and community service. No jail time, but he'll have a fraud conviction on his record. and the DA made it clear that if he violates probation or tries this again, they'll prosecute him to the full extent. So that's it? That's it. He also can't contact you. There's a no-contact order as part of the divorce settlement. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, but something close. An end. How do you feel? Rachel asked. Tired, I said honestly, but also lighter, like I've been carrying something heavy for years and I finally put it down. That's exactly what happened. I went back to work full-time. I picked up shifts at all 3 hospitals again, not because I needed the money now, but because I'd missed the work. I'd missed using my brain, my language skills, helping patients communicate with their doctors. I started seeing a therapist in January. Her name was Dr. Martinez. She specialized in trauma and manipulation. We talked about trust, about how I'd been conditioned to see myself as a caretaker, about how I'd ignored my own instincts because I'd been taught that doubt was unkind. You're not responsible for what he did, she told me in one session. You responded to a situation you believed was real with compassion and generosity. Those are good qualities. He exploited them. That's on him, not you. I started dating again in March. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and dinners, relearning how to be a person who wasn't defined by someone else's supposed needs. In April, I got a letter from Daniel's sister. She apologized for her brother. She said she'd figured out something was wrong years ago but hadn't known how to confront him. She offered to testify if I ever needed it, though by that point the legal case was closed. I wrote back and thanked her. I told her I didn't blame her. I told her I hoped she was doing okay. Then I threw the letter away. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need to hold on to it anymore. By summer, I'd stopped thinking about Daniel every day. I'd stopped checking over my shoulder for him in grocery stores or coffee shops. I'd stopped expecting him to somehow show up and try to manipulate his way back into my life. I started teaching sign language classes on weekends at the community center. I met a woman named Jen who was deaf and worked as a graphic designer. We became friends. She invited me to a deaf community event in July, a picnic in the park with interpreters and music played through vibration platforms and kids running around with their hands flying in conversation. It felt like coming home to a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. Looking back, I can see how many red flags I missed. But I can also see how deliberate Daniel was, how carefully he constructed his lie, how he isolated me in small ways so I wouldn't question him. I don't blame myself anymore. Not really. What I learned is this: trust isn't stupidity. Compassion isn't weakness. Helping someone doesn't make you a fool. But when someone shows you who they are, when the evidence starts piling up, when your instincts start screaming, when the story stops making sense, you have to listen. You have to trust yourself more than you trust their performance. And if you find yourself in a situation like mine, document everything. Tell someone you trust. Don't wait for the perfect moment to confront them, because that moment will never come. Protect yourself first. I'm sharing this story because I know I'm not the only one who's been lied to by someone they loved. I'm not the only one who's ignored their gut because they didn't want to seem unkind or suspicious. If this sounds familiar, if you're in a situation where something feels wrong but you can't quite name it, pay attention to that feeling. It's trying to tell you something, so where does that leave me now? I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I have my own space, my own life, my own work. I have friends who don't need me to be anything other than myself. I have mornings where I drink coffee and read without describing every single thing out loud. I have evenings where I can just exist without performing care for someone who never needed it. I'm rebuilding, and it feels good. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know what you think. And if you have a title suggestion for the next one, something you've experienced or witnessed or heard about, drop it below. I'll pick one for next week. Where are you watching from? How did this story land for you? I'm Emma, and I'm finally Genuinely, completely free.